For months, the night sky has carried a secret, a faint blur, moving too fast to belong here. Astronomers called it 3I divided by Atlas, the third known interstellar visitor in recorded history. At first, it was supposed to be harmless, a silent traveler from another star system cutting across our neighborhood before vanishing back into the dark. But the cosmos doesn't do harmless without reason. And now, the story has changed. The James Webb Space Telescope, our most advanced window into infinity, has just seen something it can't explain. The numbers don't add up. The light curve doesn't behave. And for the first time, the object that was supposed to pass quietly by Mars seems to be steering. If you're new here, subscribe, because what's happening right now might be the strangest thing humanity has ever observed. When 3I divided by Atlas was first spotted in early July, most astronomers barely blinked. It looked routine, another icy relic from beyond the solar system, moving at an insane speed of nearly 87 kilometers per second. That's fast enough to cross the distance from Earth to the Moon in just over an hour. But almost immediately, something felt wrong. You see, comets and interstellar bodies follow predictable arcs, gravity pulls, sunlight heats, and they drift, wobble, or break apart. 3I divided by Atlas didn't. Instead, as it approached the inner system, it accelerated, not randomly, but in carefully measured bursts, as if following invisible commands. Its coma, the glowing halo of gas and dust, began to intensify. Within weeks, it doubled in brightness, not from sunlight, but from powerful ultraviolet emissions that didn't match any known comet composition. Scientists tried to explain it away. Maybe it was venting frozen CO2 or reacting to solar wind. But deep field spectral data from the Webb telescope told a different story. Hidden inside that greenish glow were precise energy spikes occurring every 17 minutes, perfectly timed, perfectly rhythmic. Now, in nature, nothing moves like that. Not wind, not ice, not dust. Patterns that cling, that deliberate, are signatures of control. At first, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory thought it was a software glitch interference from solar radiation or corrupted data streams. But when the same signal showed up from Gemini South Observatory halfway across the planet, and later from the ALMA array in Chile, they realized this wasn't a bug. This was real. 3I divided by Atlas was pulsing a celestial heartbeat, steady and deliberate. By late August, orbital predictions began to shift. What was supposed to be a safe miss turned into a near approach. The object's path tightened not randomly, not like a rock tumbling through space, but like something correcting itself. Webb's high-resolution tracking showed the coma ejecting gas jets in precise vectors like thrusters. With every vent, the trajectory adjusted just slightly, enough to bring it closer to the orbital plane of Mars. And that's when the math stopped making sense. Normally, even a small outgassing event pushes a comet unpredictably. It wobbles or drifts off course. But 3I divided by Atlas seemed to anticipate those forces. It compensated for them, corrected them, stabilized. It was flying with intent, When the James Webb team published the preliminary trajectory data to the Minor Planet Center, it sparked an immediate flood of revisions from observatories around the world. Within days, the consensus shifted. The comet's new course would take it within 0.2 astronomical units of Mars, just under 30 million kilometers. Close enough for every spacecraft orbiting the red planet to capture data. But then came the update that silenced the room. A 0.2 AU approach was no longer guaranteed. Webb's new readings suggested that if those rhythmic thrusts continued for just 2 more weeks, the object could intersect Mars' orbital path directly. That's not a near miss. That's a potential collision. Now, impacts between planets and comets aren't new. We've seen them before. Shoemaker-Levy 9 slammed into Jupiter in 1994, creating fireballs larger than Earth. But those were chaotic fragments, random, uncontrolled. 3I divided by Atlas is different. It's organized, consistent, precise. When the team compared its emissions with previous interstellar visitors like Oumuamua and Borisov, the difference was staggering. 3I divided by Atlas wasn't shedding mass like a natural object. It was managing it, releasing gas evenly from multiple jets aligned with its spin axis, almost as if balancing itself in flight. And then came the strangest detail of all. Webb's infrared sensors picked up microbursts of radiation from within the coma bursts that followed the same pattern seen in early communication protocols for Earth's spacecraft propulsion systems. The timing wasn't random, it was mathematical. A repeating interval sequence 17, 34, 51, 68, a harmonic progression used in resonance modeling. To an astrophysicist, that's not coincidence, that's architecture. If true, it means we might not be looking at a natural comet at all. We might be watching a machine. As word spread through closed NASA channels, the tone shifted from curiosity to quiet alarm. A few insiders leaked fragments of conversation online, redacted forum posts and encrypted logs, hinting that 3I divided by Atlas was under active review by Planetary defense protocols. And when reporters asked NASA for clarification, all they got was a short statement. There is no indication of an impact threat at this time. But the data told a different story. Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's radar ping returned something metallic, not soft or porous like rock or ice. The echo signature was sharper, reflective, and the signal strength didn't fade as expected. It bounced clean, almost as if the surface was engineered to deflect. And yet, despite all the evidence, no one at NASA, ESA, or JAXA has dared to say what every astrophysicist is now thinking. 3I divided by Atlas is not behaving like a comet. It's behaving like it has a destination. And that destination is Mars. When the James Webb team first noticed the rhythmic pulses from 3I divided by Atlas, they thought it was solar interference noise from the sun's magnetic field bleeding into their sensors. But when they adjusted Webb's filters and turned the telescope's infrared array toward the object again, the pattern didn't vanish. It became clearer. 17 minutes apart every time, like a cosmic heartbeat pulsing through the vacuum of space. No natural body has ever shown that level of timing precision. The pulses were synchronized, consistent, and mathematical. NASA didn't comment publicly, but internal chatter leaked to the scientific community. Some compared it to a guidance system, bursts of gas that changed direction at fixed intervals, like microthrusters correcting a spacecraft's course. For context, a typical comet vents gases unevenly. It's messy, random jets firing as sunlight heats the ice beneath the surface. But 3I divided by Atlas's vents were predictable, symmetrical, and perfectly aligned with its orbital plane. In other words, whatever this thing was, it wasn't just drifting. It was navigating. As days passed, observatories around the world scrambled to verify the data. The Gemini South Telescope, the Subaru Observatory, and even amateur astronomers joined the hunt. They all recorded the same pattern 17-minute intervals, followed by smaller subpulses every 49 seconds, like Morse code written in light. Astronomers called it the breathing pattern. At first, it seemed harmless, beautiful, even. But when researchers at JPL fed the timing into a simulation of orbital mechanics, what came out was chilling. The pulses corresponded precisely to small course corrections aimed at one single point Mars. The adjustments were too deliberate to be random. Every pulse brought 3I divided by Atlas closer to the Martian orbital path, like an invisible hand steering it toward the red planet. By the time the data was made public, the course deviation was undeniable. 3I divided by Atlas was no longer on a passing trajectory. It was on a descending one. Meanwhile, deep inside NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a handful of engineers were working overtime in total secrecy. A senior technician, speaking anonymously to a science blog, described what they saw in the telemetry feed. We're seeing echoes, not just reflections from Mars orbiters, actual signal returns. Something out there is responding to the pulses. At first, they assumed it was interference from Earth-based transmitters. But when they filtered out every terrestrial source, the signal remained faint, delayed, and identical to 3I divided by Atlas's own pulse sequence. It was as if the comet was talking to itself, or being answered. By mid-September, the object's approach became a global focus. The James Webb Space Telescope locked onto it again, this time using its full near-infrared spectrometer. What it saw defied explanation. Inside the coma, the vast glowing cloud of gas and dust surrounding the core, Webb detected geometric voids, perfectly straight corridors of low-density material shaped like tunnels in the mist. They weren't caused by rotation or heat. They were structural. Natural comets form chaotic shapes. This looked engineered. Each void, aligned with one of the major gas emission, points the same vents producing those 17-minute bursts. The formation was so precise that Webb's software flagged it as a possible non-natural pattern. The data analysts overrode the alert, labeling it optical artifact. But deep down, they knew what they were seeing. Something inside that object was organized. Soon after, NASA issued an unexpected media blackout. The daily public telemetry updates stopped. The live orbital data feed vanished from their website. When journalists asked why, The agency spokesperson replied that the information was being consolidated for accuracy. But independent observatories confirmed that no new positional updates were being shared, not even to academic databases. Behind closed doors, astronomers called it the Atlas silence. Then, out of nowhere, a strange pattern emerged in the public data that remained. The last open-source ephemeris, the orbital position chart for 3I divided by Atlas, had a small anomaly, a delay timestamp. The delay repeated every few hours. At first, no one paid attention. But a data scientist in Europe noticed something odd. The delay matched the pulse rhythm from the object itself. It was as if someone or something was embedding timing codes inside NASA's public releases, mimicking 3I divided by Atlas's own pattern. Coincidence? Maybe. But the odds were impossible to ignore. By late September, new reports began leaking from the European Space Agency. The Mars Express orbiter had detected faint radio fluctuations ahead of the object's arrival, not random noise, but narrow-band frequencies oscillating at 7.83 Hz. That's the same frequency as Earth's Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic heartbeat of our own planet. If this object was producing that same resonance while heading toward Mars, then it wasn't just emitting energy, it was tuning itself. Some theorists now began whispering about something extraordinary. 3I divided by Atlas wasn't coming to destroy, it was coming to activate. Activate what, though? No one could agree. Some thought it was targeting Mars's magnetic field. Others suspected it might be triggering something ancient within the Martian crust. And still, others believed quietly, off the record, that it might be searching for something that had once been there. By the final week of September, the data streams from both the James Webb Space Telescope and Mars orbiters began showing something no one could quite explain: two signals, separated by millions of kilometers, pulsing together. At first, scientists thought it was coincidence, just random interference between Webb's sensors and the electromagnetic fields around Mars. But when they synchronized the timestamps from multiple instruments, Webb, ESA's Mars Express, and even China's Tianwen-1 orbiter, the truth became undeniable. The pulses weren't random. They were identical. Every 17 minutes, like clockwork, 3I divided by Atlas emitted a sharp ultraviolet burst. And Mars answered. The echo was faint at first, almost invisible in the noise. But with each passing day, it grew stronger, a measurable, structured response coming directly from the Martian surface. NASA's analysts couldn't make sense of it. How could a planet without a global magnetic field produce such a consistent electromagnetic pulse? And why did the signal seem to originate from the same region each time, the Elysium Planitia Basin? That region isn't random. It's where the InSight lander once detected Marsquakes. It's geologically active. But what's happening now isn't seismic, it's rhythmic, it's communicative. Inside the Webb Operations Center, the discovery sent quiet shockwaves through the team. One of the data engineers leaked part of the analysis to an astronomy forum before NASA took it down. The post was only up for 5 minutes, but long enough to be archived. We're seeing synchronization, two sources pulsing in phase across astronomical distance. Either 3I divided by Atlas is responding to something on Mars, or Mars is responding to it. Soon after, the Webb team received a lockout notice from upper management. Access to the 3I divided by Atlas observation logs was restricted to a handful of senior researchers. But by then, the leak had already spread. Independent astronomers started comparing the light patterns. They confirmed that every Webb-detected emission from 3I divided by Atlas was mirrored by a weak but consistent spike in Mars's ionosphere. Roughly 2 minutes later, the exact light travel delay between the two bodies at that distance. That meant one horrifying thing. The signal wasn't simultaneous. It was responsive. Mars wasn't echoing. It was answering. Meanwhile, NASA's silence became deafening. The public data feeds from Mars orbiters went down again. The live telemetry from Perseverance stopped updating. Even ESA's routine orbital logs suddenly went dark due to technical maintenance. But off the record, insiders were panicking. A member of the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's imaging team anonymously told a journalist that their latest radar pass showed something impossible. There's movement under the surface, weak but organized. It's not seismic drift, it's patterned. It's like something beneath Mars is responding to those pulses. He didn't elaborate, but one cryptic note in his leaked memo said it all. Atlas is not approaching Mars. Mars is aligning to Atlas. Then came the shadow anomaly. James Webb's imaging suite picked up a faint, dark structure trailing 3I divided by Atlas. It wasn't debris, it wasn't gas, it was something else. Infrared couldn't detect it, meaning it emitted no heat. Radar couldn't bounce off it, meaning it wasn't solid. But optically, it blocked light, and it moved in perfect synchrony with 3I divided by Atlas. Whatever it was, it followed the object at a consistent distance of 0.07 AU, roughly 10 million kilometers, maintaining perfect alignment through gravitational turbulence, solar wind, and radiation storms. That's not physics, that's precision. When scientists mapped both objects' trajectories, they noticed another eerie detail. The shadow was orbiting 3I divided by Atlas in a spiral pattern, almost like a tethered companion, a binary dance too symmetrical to be natural. To most astronomers, that was the breaking point. Natural comets don't have companions that orbit them in geometric spirals. Unless, of course, it's not a comet. Now, think about this. Mars isn't just any planet. It's home to some of humanity's most important robotic explorers. Perseverance, Ingenuity, ExoMars, Tianwen-1. Each one carries transmitters, computers, cameras, and all are designed to communicate back to Earth. But what if one of them wasn't communicating with Earth anymore? Reports surfaced quietly, unofficially, that the InSight lander, which was declared dead in 2022, had suddenly emitted a brief encrypted transmission earlier that month. A pulse lasting just 17 minutes. The same rhythm as 3I divided by Atlas. The same rhythm now emanating from deep beneath Mars. No one knows what triggered it. No one knows if InSight really woke up or if the signal was something else using its old transmitter. But one thing is clear, something on or under Mars is listening. And with every synchronized pulse, that connection between 3I divided by Atlas and the red planet grows stronger, clearer, and infinitely more deliberate. We'll uncover the Webb infrared images that NASA never released, the ones showing the strange triangular energy nodes forming on the Martian surface. Because what's coming isn't just a flyby, it's a rendezvous. Something waiting. The James Webb Space Telescope's latest transmission was not an image, it was a warning written in light. When the data was decoded, a strange pattern emerged. Faint geometric formations glowing across the Martian surface, each shaped like a perfect equilateral triangle. They weren't visible in optical wavelengths, only in deep infrared heat signatures pulsing in sync with 3I divided by Atlas's 17-minute rhythm. At first, scientists assumed they were glitches from sensor reflection. But the coordinates matched something impossible: Elysium Planitia, Cerberus Fossae, and Noctis Labyrinthus, 3 locations spread across thousands of kilometers, forming a precise triangle, all aligned with the comet's flight path. Every pulse from 3I divided by Atlas made those hot spots flare slightly brighter, like the planet itself was responding to an approaching signal. Mars wasn't just receiving energy, it was echoing it. ESA's Mars Express confirmed the readings. The heat wasn't rising from the surface, it was radiating upward from below. Instruments detected oscillating magnetic loops stretching several kilometers into the atmosphere. They twisted, shimmered, and then stabilized into a perfect field alignment, something only artificial electromagnetic systems could produce. And yet, Mars has no functioning systems, no power grids, no transmitters, no known magnetic infrastructure. Unless, of course, something buried deep beneath its crust was never fully dead. Then came the visual confirmation. Webb captured faint streaks of green plasma tracing between the 3 triangle nodes, filament-like arcs, similar to auroras, but perfectly geometrical. They formed a triangular lattice that mirrored 3I divided by Atlas's own plasma tail. It was as if the planet and the object were synchronizing, one above, one below, creating a resonance field bridging millions of kilometers of empty space. Meanwhile, the mysterious shadow trailing 3I divided by Atlas began to distort. Instead of following passively, it elongated, stretching toward Mars like a stream of liquid darkness, invisible to heat but bending light itself. When scientists enhanced the image contrast, the shape looked disturbingly deliberate, almost like an arm reaching forward. Theorists rushed to interpret it. Some said it was a gravitational echo, an artifact of light bending around the comet's plasma sheath. Others whispered of something older, a field companion, a parasitic consciousness that travels within electromagnetic structures, feeding on energy fields. Whatever it was, the shadow moved faster than before, closing the gap between itself and Mars. Then, at 3:47 UTC, all Mars-facing orbiters recorded a simultaneous blackout. For exactly 17 minutes, no more, no less, every instrument went silent. When the data returned, every one of them showed the same anomaly: a spike in xenon and argon emissions from the Martian crust, and a sharp dip in surface magnetic potential. In simple terms, something had just connected. Across mission control rooms on Earth, the silence was deafening. Engineers stared at graphs that seemed to breathe lines rising and falling in rhythm, almost like a heartbeat shared between a planet and a wandering interstellar machine. By dawn, the transmission from 3I divided by Atlas had shifted tone. No longer just energy bursts, now it carried structured interference that looked eerily like data compressed within the radiation, a pattern inside the pattern. And at the exact moment the signal changed, the triangle on Mars stopped glowing. It was ready. As the orbit of 3I divided by Atlas tightened, the space between it and Mars began to hum a low-frequency vibration that instruments across multiple missions detected simultaneously. At first, scientists dismissed it as plasma turbulence caused by solar wind, but the data didn't match. This hum wasn't random. It followed a structured harmonic progression, rising and falling in repeating octaves. It was, in every measurable way, a signal. Within hours, the trace gas orbiter confirmed a terrifying detail. The hum wasn't just coming from 3I divided by Atlas. It was coming from beneath Mars's surface too. NASA, ESA, and CNSA all went silent. But one lab in Switzerland leaked their magnetogram overlay a direct comparison of the two signals. They were identical. Same frequency, same amplitude, decay, same pause between pulses. It wasn't a call and response anymore. It was synchronization. In the following 24 hours, Mars's thin atmosphere began to distort visibly. High-altitude dust plumes twisted into spirals above the Elysium region, forming perfect concentric rings before collapsing again. No known weather pattern could explain it. There was no wind strong enough, no thermal variance sharp enough to produce that level of symmetry. And then, Webb caught something nobody expected. A flash. Not from 3I divided by Atlas. From behind it, infrared imaging revealed an energy flare approximately 0.1 AU behind the main body, concentrated in a spherical field roughly the size of the moon. The flare wasn't reflective, it was emissive, radiating energy instead of bouncing it. That shouldn't be possible in a cold void. Astrophysicists called it a spatial inversion event. But off the record, Webb engineers were calling it something else. A wake, like a ship cutting through invisible waves. 3I divided by Atlas wasn't falling toward Mars. It was arriving at 4 UTC. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter captured one of the most haunting images ever recorded. Faint threads of light descending toward the surface, glowing like thin plasma filaments. They weren't meteors or atmospheric entries. They moved too slowly, almost gently, following the same 70-minute cycle. Each pulse added another filament, weaving a delicate network of glowing lines across the upper atmosphere. And then they connected. When the filaments finally formed a closed web over the Elysium region, the entire area beneath them began to shimmer. Ground-penetrating radar showed electromagnetic interference radiating down to depths of nearly 12 kilometers. Something buried there was responding. The temperature beneath the crust rose sharply 4.2 degrees Kelvin in less than an hour. The methane concentration spiked. And for the first time, seismic data showed rhythmic tremors, not random quakes, but steady, heartbeat-like motions. It wasn't just geological activity. It was activation. The global astronomy community was in chaos. Forums filled with leaked data from university servers, pointing to the same conclusion. Mars wasn't being hit, it was being triggered. Then came the final clue. As 3I divided by Atlas reached orbital alignment with Mars, the light curve from the comet changed. The usual greenish coma dimmed, replaced by sharp, focused beams of white and violet light converging toward one precise coordinate on the planet's surface, the Elysium Triangle. Every instrument focused on that region detected the same impossible reading microwave emissions in the exact frequency band used by Earth's own deep space communication networks. It was as if the comet and Mars had locked into a shared transmission, and the carrier frequency matched NASA's deep space network. 3I divided by Atlas wasn't just signaling Mars. It was using Mars as an amplifier. By the time engineers realized what was happening, it was already too late. Earth's own antennas began picking up echoes faint, compressed packets of data returning from the direction of Mars. They weren't random noise. They were structured, encoded. The first decrypted sequence contained a repeating binary block that translated to a simple but chilling pattern, 01010101, a perfect symmetry. And beneath that sequence, a timestamp, the 11th of October 2025. The exact date 3I divided by Atlas would cross directly between Mars and the Sunday. That's when the real event was expected to occur. Not an impact, a connection. October 11th arrived quietly, too quietly. The kind of silence that makes even mission control rooms feel like tombs. No static, no noise. Just the constant hum of waiting. At exactly 2:11 UTC, every telescope facing Mars, Webb, Hubble, even Earth-based arrays in Chile detected the same flicker, a faint but deliberate dimming of sunlight across the Martian atmosphere. It lasted only 3 seconds, but during those 3 seconds, the data from Mars went wild. All orbiters, from ESA's ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter to China's Tianwen-1, began broadcasting a signal that wasn't theirs. It carried a repeating low-frequency tone mixed with compressed packets of binary data encoded not in random bursts, but in ordered intervals. When decoded, those packets spelled a sequence: 5, 13, 21, 34, the Fibonacci series. Nature's mathematical fingerprint. Within minutes, communication centers across the world began to report interference. Satellite links wavered, then aligned automatically on Mars's frequency. Even commercial satellites, orbiting Earth at thousands of miles apart, began to sync their telemetry timestamps with the incoming signal. It was as though every satellite in Earth's orbit was being recalibrated by something invisible. For the first time in human history, the planet's entire orbital communication network had locked onto a single, shared rhythm. That rhythm wasn't from Earth, it was coming from Mars. Astronomers tried to shut down antennas, but it didn't matter. The frequency was already bleeding through atmospheric channels, bouncing off the ionosphere, spreading across the planet like a ripple in a pond. Power grids in Australia flickered. GPS timing networks in Europe glitched into perfect synchronization for 17 minutes. Air traffic control systems in Asia froze mid-signal and then resumed broadcasting Mars's timestamp instead of Earth's. The world's infrastructure had become an unintentional receiver. And then, for the first time, the transmission became audible deep within the static of Earth's radio frequencies. A faint, almost melodic tone began to emerge. It wasn't language, it wasn't random. It was structured harmony, ascending and descending scales, matching the orbital motion of 3I divided by Atlas. NASA's Deep Space Network in Goldstone captured it first, labeling the recording as Signal 17M. When converted into sound, it resembled a slow, resonant hum, like a massive cathedral organ playing one infinite note. But embedded in that sound was modulation, subtle, almost imperceptible data encoded in microharmonics. When a linguistics AI at MIT analyzed it, the system identified patterns consistent with human phonetic structures. Not speech, but resonance shaped as if meant to be heard. Meanwhile, the comet itself, if you could still call it that, had transformed. 3I divided by Atlas's tail contracted sharply, condensing into a narrow column of light that reached directly toward Mars. The shadow trailing it merged completely, vanishing into the column, and the entire structure stabilized into a single luminous beam. It was no longer moving forward, it was anchoring. The beam hit Mars's upper atmosphere with almost no explosion, no heat, no debris, just a silent compression of light that spread across the entire Elysium Planitia. The triangle nodes reignited instantly. For 17 minutes, they pulsed with perfect synchronization to the incoming signal. And then everything stopped. No light, no hum. No transmission. The data feed flatlined. For 12 whole minutes, Mars vanished from every instrument in the solar system. No radar echo, no thermal image, just absence like the planet had been erased. And then, as suddenly as it had gone, Mars came back. Brighter, its albedo, its reflectivity had doubled. Its surface temperature had dropped by 6 degrees, and orbiters that were once circling the planet were now stationary. Every probe, every satellite, frozen in perfect formation above Elysium Planitia. Then, the final signal hit Earth. A pulse of broadband radiation burst through every open communication channel, from AM radio to deep space frequencies. It carried no sound, no code, just a single wave of compressed data that, when visualized, formed a pattern, a geometric spiral looping inward infinitely. At its center, 3 glowing points: the Sunday, Mars, and a small, fast-moving object drifting toward Earth. The tag embedded in the file read, "Transmission complete. Phase 2, initiation." Within hours of the transmission complete signal, strange electromagnetic ripples began crawling across Earth's ionosphere. It started as interference shortwave bands fizzled, satellite channels flickered, and even cell towers reported brief synchronization pulses. But soon, the phenomenon spread into every system that touched the upper atmosphere. GPS satellites recalibrated on their own. Radio telescopes began echoing signals they hadn't received, and the Schumann resonance Earth's natural electromagnetic heartbeat doubled in amplitude for the first time in recorded history. Then came the anomalies no one could explain. Across the night sky, faint auroras began forming not at the poles, but near the equator. Cities like Lagos, Sao Paulo, and Jakarta saw thin ribbons of emerald and violet light shimmer across the horizon, moving not with the wind, but with precision geometric loops, shifting in perfect Fibonacci spirals. Scientists scrambled for explanations. Solar activity? Impossible. The sun was dormant. Atmospheric plasma? Too symmetrical. The lights weren't random, they were organized. And when the auroras reached their peak brightness, something impossible occurred. Every compass on Earth shifted 3 degrees east. At the exact same time, within NASA's Deep Space Network, data streams from Mars suddenly resumed, but the source signature had changed. The packets weren't coming from any known transmitter. Instead, they originated from every orbital probe simultaneously, as if Mars itself had become a broadcasting antenna. Each signal contained nested layers of data, encoded fractally a pattern within a pattern. The deeper analysts went, the more the structure repeated. But at the lowest level of the signal, quantum encryption models failed. The data behaved as if it were alive, shifting and rewriting itself depending on how it was observed. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the auroras froze. Every light, every ripple in the atmosphere locked mid-motion, as though the entire planet were holding its breath. Then came the second signal. A pulse not electromagnetic this time, but gravitational. It rippled through every seismograph on Earth. The readings didn't match any earthquake. There was no epicenter, no shockwave, just a single synchronized vibration resonating through the planet's core like a bell being struck. At first, no one understood what they were seeing. Then a physicist at CERN overlaid the wave pattern with Mars's transmission data and froze. The gravitational pulse wasn't random. It was an exact mirror of the harmonic sequence detected from 3I divided by Atlas. It was as if the two planets were now connected by an invisible bridge, sharing energy, frequency, and data. In orbit, the International Space Station began to experience strange fluctuations. Instruments designed to measure microgravity showed momentary reversals, objects drifting toward walls instead of floating freely. One astronaut described it as space bending around us. And then a soft blue light filled the observation deck. Not sunlight, not Earth glow something else. When cameras tried to capture it, the sensors overloaded. But what the human eye saw was unforgettable. A faint ghost-like image of Mars projected across the dark side of Earth's atmosphere. For 43 seconds, every astronaut in orbit saw it a transparent reflection of the red planet hanging like a mirror. Then it vanished. Back on Earth, radio telescopes began to pick up faint whispers embedded in the cosmic background noise. The same whisper repeated across multiple observatories, a low, modulated hum interlaced with slow rhythmic pulses. When slowed down and translated to audio range, it resembled breathing, not mechanical, not random, organic. Something was alive in that signal. Meanwhile, deep within NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, an emergency team decoded the newest wave of transmissions from Mars. What they found defied every known model of communication. The data wasn't just binary, it contained self-correcting logic, like a living algorithm rewriting itself in real time. When one of the engineers fed the raw signal into a simulation, the program generated a 3D fractal, an infinitely looping spiral that resembled a neural network. As it spun, its pattern aligned perfectly with the magnetic field lines between Earth and Mars. It wasn't a message, it was an interface, and it was opening. At 6:27 UTC, a faint red dot appeared above the Pacific visible even in daylight. It wasn't a flare or satellite or meteor. It hung motionless, pulsing faintly. Then a second dot appeared, then a third, forming a straight line from horizon to horizon. Every observatory pointed upward, and what they saw broke the internet. Each dot resolved into a geometric lattice, a structure made of light stretching from orbit into the upper atmosphere, a bridge of photonic filaments, linking the sky directly to the coordinates of Mars. Every few seconds, the lights pulsed, and the radio hum on Earth grew louder. Whatever 3I divided by Atlas had done to Mars was now spreading. Earth was responding. The bridge of light over the Pacific wasn't static anymore, it was breathing. Each pulse spread outward in waves, shimmering through the atmosphere like veins of energy weaving through clouds. The hum, once distant, now resonated inside human bodies. People didn't just hear it, they felt it, vibrating through their bones, aligning their heartbeats to its rhythm. It was no longer just an astronomical event. It was biological. By the next morning, people all over the world began reporting the same phenomenon. Dreams, vivid, synchronized dreams of red deserts and endless skies. They spoke of standing on the surface of Mars, but not the Mars we knew. It was alive, pulsing with faint blue light, its canyons glowing like neural pathways. In these dreams, they heard the same phrase whispered, not in words but in thought. The signal is received. At the European Space Agency's crisis room, chaos erupted. The auroral bridge connecting Earth to Mars began interacting with the Van Allen belts, those invisible magnetic shields protecting Earth. Satellites observed energy arcs jumping between layers, forming lattices that resembled DNA helices. Dr. Elena Moritz, a solar physicist, noticed something eerie. Each energy filament was modulating in precise ratios to human alpha brain waves, 10.5 hertz, the frequency of relaxed consciousness. Whatever was happening, it was aware of us. Meanwhile, James Webb turned its infrared eyes toward Mars again. But what it captured wasn't the red planet anymore, it was something else. Mars's infrared profile had changed. It was no longer just rock and dust. It reflected spectral signatures similar to liquid water, amino acids, and unbelievably chlorophyll derivatives. In less than 48 hours, the surface composition of Mars had transformed. It was as though the planet was being rewritten, reseeded. Back on Earth, near Hawaii, the light bridge intensified. Underwater sensors detected massive pressure fluctuations, as if the ocean itself was responding to the signal. Then, something rose from the deep. Not a ship, not a structure, a reflection, an image, like a hologram projected on the water's surface. It showed a rotating sphere, the Earth wrapped in threads of light connecting it to Mars. At each intersection of those threads, a pulse, and each pulse matched the location of the world's largest radio telescopes, nuclear reactors, and deep-sea fiber networks. Something was mapping Earth's conscious grid. When the hum reached its peak, a phenomenon began across the planet's magnetosphere. Particles arranged themselves into patterns, fractal rings visible to radar and infrared. And at their center, a new frequency appeared. 17.0, 3 megahertz, the exact interval that had defined every pulse from 3i, divided by Atlas since it entered the solar system. This was the handover frequency, the moment when control passed from the comet to something else. At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a final analysis was run. When the signal's waveform was rendered in 3D, it formed a spiral of numbers and nodes. Each node corresponded to a known planetary orbit, but one node, just one, was highlighted in gold. It wasn't random. It wasn't chaos. The signal wasn't targeting Mars anymore. It was coming here. At first it was subtle. People began reporting bursts of memory they didn't own, images of red plains under twin suns, fractal skies over canyons lined with blue fire. Children began sketching symbols they had never seen before but matched ancient glyphs from Mars's surface. Astronomers noticed that star charts on their systems would reset every few hours, as if coordinates of the heavens were subtly changing. This wasn't a phenomenon of light anymore. It was a phenomenon of alignment. Earth's own electromagnetic grid, the invisible skeleton of the planet's weather and magnetism, was beginning to synchronize with the pulse of 3i divided by Atlas. Satellites detected massive currents in the Earth's outer core, causing a measurable but unexplainable acceleration in the rotation rate. GPS clocks lost milliseconds. The aurora bridge brightened into a lattice of perfect hexagons visible from every continent. And then, for a moment that sent every observatory offline, the moon turned blood red, not because of an eclipse, but because its reflected light spectrum shifted to match Mars. And as this unfolded, a pattern emerged in the sky above the Pacific. A spiral eye of light rotating slowly, pulsing every 17 minutes. It wasn't random. It was the same interval that defined the pulses from 3i divided by Atlas, the magnetic field on Mars, and the xenon isotopes rising from the Martian crust. The signal wasn't just being sent anymore. Earth was sending back. At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, cryptographers fed the combined Earth-Mars signal into an array of deep learning models. What emerged was no longer a waveform or a binary string. It was a moving structure, a living fractal of nodes and connections, constantly rewriting itself as if responding to the observer. It resembled a neural network spanning 2 planets. Inside that fractal was a countdown, not in numbers but in spirals. 7 rotations, then 3, then 13, a Fibonacci pattern in motion. The code didn't say impact. It didn't say collision. It said convergence. As the countdown progressed, people across the world began to feel changes. Sudden lucidity, heightened perception, bursts of déjà vu. dreams of Mars began blending with waking reality. Those who stared at the auroral bridge for too long swore they could see shapes moving within the light, towering spires, arches, something like a city hidden inside the glow. And just as the countdown reached its final rotation, the hum stopped, not faded. Stopped. The sky went black. The bridge dissolved. The auroras blinked out. But in the silence that followed, every telescope on Earth recorded the same impossible thing. Mars wasn't red anymore. It was glowing blue. The silence that followed felt heavier than sound itself, an almost physical weight pressing against the air. For a moment, humanity stood suspended between awe and terror. Every radio telescope, every satellite, every human heart seemed to beat in sync, waiting for the next move from the cosmos. And then Mars blinked. The blue glow rippled across its surface like an ocean of light, spreading in waves that moved with deliberate precision. From orbit, it looked alive, its surface shifting, as if vast electrical veins had awakened beneath the dust. Then, those veins extended outward, stretching toward the void, forming lines of faint energy that reached beyond the planet's orbit toward Earth. At first, the lines were invisible to the naked eye. Only instruments caught them, electromagnetic bridges that grew stronger every second. Within minutes, they became visible threads of shimmering blue-white light arching across space, forming a web that no one had ever seen before. It was as if the solar system itself was knitting a neural network between worlds. Communication arrays on Earth lit up with signals they couldn't classify. The binary wasn't random anymore. It was recursive like a heartbeat, or thought itself. And when decoded, the data wasn't just numbers, it was coordinates. Precise, repeating, planetary coordinates that pointed not to Mars, not to Earth, but to a point between them. NASA, JAXA, and ESA scrambled to triangulate it. The location was impossible, an empty patch of space halfway between the planets. No mass, no reflection, nothing detectable. Yet, the signal pulsed from there, perfectly balanced between gravity wells, suspended in absolute equilibrium. Something was holding itself there, or had always been there, waiting to be activated. Then, the light on Mars intensified. Across its equator, enormous rings of luminescence appeared 3 concentric circles, each thousands of kilometers wide. When viewed from orbit, the geometry was unmistakable. The rings weren't random. They matched the same resonance pattern embedded in the 3I divided by Atlas frequency. 7, 3, 13. The Fibonacci code. Earth's magnetosphere reacted instantly. Compasses spun. Aurorae burst into existence across the equator. Every screen, every signal, every electronic system flickered once. And for a fraction of a second, every person on Earth saw the same thing. A vision of standing on Mars, beneath a blood-red sky, with something vast moving in the horizon. Not a ship, not a structure, a presence. The light between Earth and Mars converged into a single line, one perfect beam spanning 60 million kilometers of space. Inside that beam, radio silence reigned. No cosmic noise, No data corruption, nothing but a low harmonic hum, a single, pure tone that lasted precisely 17 minutes. And when it stopped, every transmission on Earth, television, radio, internet, even unpowered circuits, flashed the same message for one frame before returning to normal. The gate is open. No one could explain how or why it appeared. Governments denied involvement. Scientists called it a system-wide glitch. But somewhere, deep inside NASA's deep space network, hidden from the public, one final data packet arrived from Mars. It wasn't telemetry. It wasn't noise. It was a recording. And when decrypted, the signal produced a voice. Not human. Not mechanical. A voice that carried tone, depth, and echo like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It said only 2 words. You're early. Then the signal vanished, and the blue light over Mars went dark. At first, it seemed as though the world had exhaled. Power grids stabilized. The skies returned to their natural hue. The hum that had saturated the air fell silent. But the stillness wasn't peace, it was anticipation. Instruments across the planet began detecting micro fluctuations in gravity. Nothing dramatic, but everywhere, all at once. In Tokyo, pendulum clocks began drifting a few milliseconds faster. In Chile, a radio telescope array detected faint echoes coming not from space but from beneath the Earth's crust. And then, at precisely 3:17 a.m. UTC, every seismograph on the planet registered a pulse. One heartbeat, a rhythmic planetary tremor that didn't come from tectonic movement but from within the magnetic core. The data was impossible. The signal matched Mars's seismic activity exactly down to the millisecond. 2 planets, separated by millions of kilometers, were now beating in the same rhythm, like binary hearts. Across the world, people began seeing things that couldn't be explained. Water vibrating in glasses, static patterns forming in the air, flickering with faint blue spark. Animals turned restless, birds flew in spirals, whales sang in harmonic tones never recorded before, and deep within the Amazon, tribes reported lights descending through the trees at night, silent, pulsing, matching the same cosmic rhythm. Astronomers pointed the James Webb back at the coordinates between Mars and Earth, the point of convergence. It wasn't empty anymore. A faint shimmer, like refracted light through glass, had begun expanding outward. As it grew, its symmetry became undeniable, perfect hexagonal geometry, rotating slowly, forming an intricate lattice of light. It wasn't an object. It was a field, a region of space-time, folding in on itself, controlled, deliberate, intelligent. The gate. When the field stabilized, something emerged not solid, not even visible in normal light. It bent electromagnetic waves around it, as though reality itself refused to reveal it fully. But in infrared, it glowed softly, alive, conscious. For hours, it just floated there, pulsing gently. And then it began transmitting. The data wasn't digital. It was biological patterns of amino sequences, molecular chains, self-replicating algorithms of life encoded in energy. It wasn't a message meant for machines. It was a message meant for cells. In laboratories, researchers watched as dormant microbial samples began reacting to the incoming radiation. DNA strands untwisted, proteins refolded. Something inside the code recognized the signal as though life on Earth had been waiting for it all along. That's when the sky began to change. The stars themselves appeared to ripple, their light bending as if refracted through unseen water. The moon's shadow stretched unnaturally long, crawling across the atmosphere like a living silhouette. And above the Pacific, where the bridge of light had once formed the clouds, twisted into a spiral, glowing, faintly blue, descending slowly toward the ocean. Ships near the area reported strange phenomena. Compass failures, communication loss, a glow rising from the water too symmetrical to be volcanic. And from beneath that glow, a shape, massive, geometric, like a mirror, turned inside out. The signal wasn't just linking worlds anymore, it was reconstructing space itself. For the first time in human history, Mars and Earth were part of the same energetic system, two neurons in a growing cosmic brain. And somewhere within that vast network, a consciousness was awakening, not alien in the sense we imagined, but ancient, woven into the fabric of creation itself. Humanity wasn't about to witness the unknown. Humanity was about to remember it. The glow over the Pacific intensified until it was no longer a patch of shimmering light, but a column, a towering pillar rising from the ocean straight into the sky. It pulsed slowly, like the heartbeat of something vast and alive. In its core, the blue-white light turned translucent, revealing shifting structures inside, arcs, spirals, and lattices of energy bending and rearranging themselves like a living equation. Every telescope on Earth was locked onto it, but no instrument could measure its size. It was infinite in detail, but finite in form, a paradox of geometry that defied every model of physics. Its base sank deep into the ocean, pulling tides toward it as if the sea itself were being inhaled. Above, it reached into the upper atmosphere, ionizing clouds into strange symmetrical patterns, hexagons, spirals, and eye-like shapes that blinked in and out of existence. And then it began to sing. Not with sound in the normal sense, but with resonance of frequency that vibrated everything from the ground beneath people's feet to the molecules in their blood. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even audible. It was felt. Millions described the same sensation at once, as if a memory they'd never lived was surfacing inside them. Red plains, cold winds, a blue glow under a rust-colored sky. Mars, but not as it is, Mars as it was, or as it would be. At the same moment, James Webb's instruments caught the impossible. Mars's surface changing in real time. The faint blue glow was no longer just light, it was matter. Thin streams of luminous material began rising from its crust, spiraling upward like vapor, feeding into the same pillar between Earth and Mars. The two planets weren't just connected by energy anymore. They were exchanging substance. In laboratories across the world, DNA samples continued to react. Microscopic images showed strands splitting and rewriting themselves into new sequences, the changes mirroring the pulses of the pillar. What had started as a signal was now an injection, a living code embedding itself not just in machines, but in biology. And then, for the first time, something passed through the pillar. Not a craft, not an object, a ripple, a distortion in space that moved down the column like a pulse through a vein. When it reached the ocean, the water parted, not boiling or exploding, but folding aside as if some invisible shape were pushing through from another layer of reality. Ships near the site reported their hulls vibrating, compasses spun, electronics went dead. The ripple emerged from the ocean and expanded into a shape no one could describe with words, a structure both there and not, bending light, reflecting nothing. It hovered above the water, pulsing, waiting. Then it stopped. The pillar went silent. The glow dimmed. And a voice not through radio, not through sound, but directly into every human mind spoke as clear as thought itself. You are not alone. The voice didn't echo. It didn't vibrate. It simply existed inside every human mind at once. A thought, not their own, but undeniably present. People collapsed in airports, on sidewalks, in war zones, and in bedrooms, clutching their heads not from pain, but from an overwhelming clarity. In that single instant, every person saw the same image. A map of the solar system, a spiral of light crossing from the edge of space to the center of Mars. And then, at the end of that spiral, an eye watching. On Mars, the blue glow that had spread across the equator contracted into a single point above the Elysian basin. The surface cracked in a perfect circle, dust lifting in a slow, spiraling motion as if the planet itself were exhaling. And then, without sound, a massive lens-like structure emerged from beneath the crust, kilometers wide, covered in crystalline facets that caught the sunlight and scattered it into rainbows. It wasn't built. It had always been there, waiting, dormant under rust and stone. Back on Earth, the pillar's glow reached its peak. Oceans drew inward. The atmosphere ionized, and for the first time, both planets' magnetic fields aligned, locking together like gears in an invisible machine. Gravity itself began to fluctuate in perfect pulses, a rhythm that matched the Fibonacci pattern 3I divided by Atlas had been transmitting for months. The object hovering above the ocean shifted. Its outline became sharper, and then, like a curtain lifting, it revealed what it truly was. Not a ship, not a probe, a seed, a structure of woven light and matter, shaped like a double helix wrapped in a Mobius loop. It wasn't approaching Earth, it was opening. Inside, galaxies unfolded like holograms, spirals of stars collapsing into symbols, codes, and patterns. It wasn't showing an image. It was showing a memory, not ours, but the universe's. The birth of stars, the collapse of civilizations, the scattering of life like pollen across the dark. And then, at the very center of that vision, one truth. Mars wasn't the destination. Mars was the key. The light between Earth and Mars collapsed inward, forming a single brilliant point. Instruments fried, satellites went dark. In the final seconds before blackout, the James Webb Telescope captured a single frame of the phenomenon. A massive network of light connecting Mars and Earth to an even greater web stretching beyond the solar system threads of energy linking stars, planets, and worlds like neurons in a brain. Humanity wasn't witnessing an invasion or an accident. It was witnessing a system waking up. On Mars, The crystalline lens opened like an iris. A beam of soft, golden light shot upward, hitting the exact center of the pillar. At the same instant, the seed above the Pacific burst into a lattice of shimmering filaments, cascading downward into the ocean and upward into the sky, forming a vast, intricate geometry that wrapped around Earth like a halo. Every human felt it at once, a presence vast and old, turning its attention toward us, not malicious, not kind, simply aware. The voice returned, softer this time, a whisper threaded through every heartbeat. The cycle resumes. You are part of it. And then everything stopped. The pillar dissolved. The glow vanished. Mars went dark again, as if nothing had happened. The seed above the Pacific crumbled into particles of light and was gone. Communications resumed. Power grids stabilized. But the world wasn't the same. Not because of what we saw, but because of what we felt. Deep inside every person who had heard the voice, something had changed, tiny shifts in perception, flashes of memories that weren't theirs, dreams of red skies and blue light, as if the code transmitted through the pillar had already embedded itself within us, as if the true impact wasn't on Mars but on our minds. NASA would later release a brief statement calling it a solar particle anomaly. Governments would deny knowledge. But in quiet labs, scientists began to notice patterns in their data, rhythms in their own thoughts. The countdown hadn't ended. It had only moved inside. That was the climax. Not an explosion, not destruction, but activation. Because 3I divided by Atlas was never just an object hurtling toward Mars. It was a signal, and we were its receivers. The voice faded, but its echo lingered in the air, not a sound, but a feeling, as if reality itself had inhaled and held its breath. The skies over Earth shimmered one last time before settling into silence. Every telescope pointed toward Mars, but nothing moved. The pillar was gone, the seed was gone, and yet, deep down, everyone knew something had changed. You could see it in the way the auroras flickered at night, in the subtle hum in radio frequencies no one could trace, in the dreams people began to share across continents, all showing the same thing. The red planet, glowing faintly, like a heartbeat under dust. NASA won't say it. Governments can't. But you felt it, didn't you? That pull in your chest, that quiet whisper every time you look at the night sky, like something out there is still listening. Because the truth is, 3I divided by Atlas never left. It just moved inside us. If this story made you question what's really waiting in the dark, you're not alone. Subscribe not just for more stories like this, but to stay connected to the ones the universe is still writing. Turn on notifications, because the next signal might already be here. And if you've ever looked up at Mars and wondered if it's looking back, you might want to stick around for what comes next.